AJ, we're going to go ahead and go with you next, and then we're going to do the updates, and then we're going to try to get everybody out of here on time. And so you're up next. And while he's getting set up right here, I want to tell just a little bit about AJ. I don't think I need to use the microphone on this. AJ Hendershot, I've known him for a while. Don't let him fool you. He's very unassuming and very modest. He's written articles for Missouri Conservationist Magazine, which has been the premier outdoor magazine of any place I've ever seen. I've traveled all over the country and I've never seen anything as good as what we have in Missouri about showcasing things like going out and fishing, hunting crawdads, stargazing, on and on and on. Bow making. AJ knows how to make bows. He's a prolific drawer. You can see what he's got posted here. The posters that you're about to see here in just a few minutes, he handcrafted most of those himself, put them together. If you look back behind us right here, the one that shows the pollen analysis of the United States, blight spread maps, AJ did all that, and very talented individual. And last night at our board meeting, which many of y'all were not at, we had a big diverse group of people there. Some people have music backgrounds, some people remember the tree, some people are entomologists, some people are background in wildlife. And so a big diversity. All of them have the same thing in common as this man right here, and they are all doers. I can call AJ up and say, I've got something going on, and I know that he will not only get it done in an uncanny short period of time, but it'll be better quality than anybody else could do. And so, no pressure on you here at all. So, but anyhow, so I'm going to turn this over to AJ. Thank you.
Something that has absolutely nothing to do with my talk. I have 2 children, and they hear me talk about the things I'm passionate about on a regular basis. My son, about 5 years ago, he was 10. He was at a friend's house spending the night, and his friend's mom was lamenting about this tree in the front yard that was going to die, had to be cut down, and she said, I got to figure out what to put in that yard. And my son says, you ought to plant an Ozark Chinquapin. That was his idea. And here he is. Here's my son, 10 years old. He's heard Dad talk about these Chinquapins, and now he's telling everybody, hey, you need to plant a Chinquapin tree. And I just thought that was cute. So I'm into this. I love underdogs. I want to see them succeed. I want to see them get up off the mat and get going. And that's something I'm real passionate about. I want to see the Ozark Chinquapin get back to the way it was back in 1929 when they were called very common. I want to see that happen someday, if at all possible. Now, what I'm here to talk to you about is something that is pretty cool in terms of how do you assess the value of a species. I get asked that question a lot in my profession. If you start talking about endangered species or things that are rare or declining, you're going to have some very conservative people look at you and say, what's the value of some little mouse or some little plant that I've never seen and don't know anything about? And it's actually a very honest question that I try not to brush aside. It's important. And there are various types of value that you can assign to any living organism. One of the first ones that the majority of people can equate to is monetary. For example, the black walnut tree, you can cut that down, make a valuable wood, and sell that, and it's important. And there are lots of different examples of things like that. There is nutritional value. You can eat a plant, and it's good for you. It tastes good. There is aesthetic value. You can plant the plant, and it adds value to your property or to your yard, and it looks good. And then here's where I come in, and I feel like just because something exists, it is valuable. I'm an ecologist. I value the interactions that go on, even if I don't pretend to understand them. Now, that's something that's very difficult to get everybody to buy into. That's kind of a higher ethic, in my opinion. But you've got to be able to see some of those other values before you get to the point that you say, it's valuable because it exists. All right, so what I'm going to talk about today is the nutritional value of the Ozark Chinquapin nut. Now, Steve alluded to that earlier. That was an older study, and we have since paid for a much larger study that gives us a more comprehensive view. This was done by UBE Analytical Laboratories, and this is a place that they do testing for the USDA. So when the USDA says, here's what's in your salmon that's grilled on the grill, okay, these are the people that do the examination of all the nutrients to do that. We took a 100-gram sample of Ozark Chinquapin nuts, probably a little more than that to make sure they had enough, gave that to them. They did charge money for that, and the Ozark Chinquapin Foundation paid for that, but used grant money from the Missouri Conservation Heritage Foundation to get that accomplished. Now, there is only so much money that was budgeted, so when this was done, it was not a panacea. It was not an analysis of every nutrient, every mineral, every vitamin. It was not that. It was really some of the big stuff. So there will be gaps in some of the analysis. So then what I did, after I got that, I mean, this was awesome stuff, but I'm looking at a bunch of numbers on a chart that I'm not used to looking at, and I really don't know what it means. And then Steve says, hey, can you do a presentation last year's Ozark Chinquapin meeting? Yeah, sure. So I did, and it was very little. Those of you who were there, you go, yeah, he got up and he talked. This year, I think I actually kind of know what it means, and that's what I'm going to share with you. All right, so here's what I did. It doesn't do a lot of good to compare just the Ozark Chinquapin to something that's not a Chinquapin right off the bat. Let's do apples to apples, or in this case, nuts to nuts. I want you to look at everybody in the family. Now, here's what I did. I jumped on the USDA website, and they had every chestnut on there except for one, besides the Ozark Chinquapin, the American chestnut. I was surprised to find that there was nothing on the USDA website on the Ozark or the American chestnut. So I had to dig around and be very creative in where I looked to find some of this information that was determined by the American Chestnut Foundation. So what I did is I took that information and I looked at it apples to apples, 100-gram samples every time, so that you get this information. And here's what I did. I looked at individual categories that are major attractors to people who are looking at nutrition. If you look at the number of calories that are available in a 100-gram sample, I want you to pay attention. You've got Japanese down here at the lowest, and all the way up, who's the top? I'm very proud to tell you it's the Ozark Chinquapin. Very high in calories. Calories can come from three different sources. It can come from carbohydrates, protein, and fat. They are different in terms of how easy they are for the body to devour and assimilate. Carbohydrates are the easiest to break apart. Proteins are next. Fats are the most difficult to break apart. But they all contribute toward calories. Okay, you can see that in an Ozark Chinquapin nut, just to break down the sources for those, most of your calories are coming from carbohydrates. How many of you in this room have actually eaten at least one Ozark Chinquapin nut? Almost everybody in the room. We've got to get this man an Ozark Chinquapin. All right. They're sweet. And the reason they're sweet, I'll tell you about in just a moment. But most of their calories are coming from carbs, a little bit from the protein, and not a lot of the calories are coming from the fat, but you'd be surprised how much fat they have. And that's not always bad. Okay, next thing to look at is specifically the carbohydrates. We're not looking at calories anymore. We're just looking at those complex sugar chains. Complex sugar chains are what makes something sweet. If you take a cracker, put it in your mouth, chew it up, and don't swallow. Just put it in your mouth. Of course, you're going to get that salty sensation from the salt on the cracker. Let that pass, and just let it sit there for a bit. It might take up to 60 seconds, and eventually you're going to say, that's sweet. That's because your saliva and the enzymes in it are breaking down the carbohydrates into their individual sugar chains. And that is what you're now tasting. It's what your stomach would be tasting if it had taste buds. That's what you're doing. You're breaking down the carbohydrates into the basic sugars. And if you look at the list, who's at top? The Ozark Chinquapin, followed very closely by the chestnut, and then our other continent cousins are a distant third, fourth, and fifth. Okay, let's look at protein. Oh, yeah, I'm liking that one too. In fact, when you're trying to find something that's going to stick with you a little longer, because protein is harder to digest than carbohydrates, the Ozark Chinquapin is actually going to stick with you a little longer than eating any of the other Castanea members, which is pretty cool. So the kids that went to school back in the 1930s and 40s put a pocket full of Chinquapins, or had a pocket full of Chinquapins, ate that for lunch. It might have actually stuck with them for a while because of all that protein. Protein is also very good for your muscles. It's good for your brain. Your brain is made primarily of protein. It's to boost your immune system. So protein's important for your diet. When you look at total fat comparison, now look at this. Boy, this blows out the cousins, doesn't it? I mean, just blows them away in comparison. Now, try not to get too wound up about this. You hear the word fat, you immediately assume, oh, this is horrible. Oh, can't eat any more Chinquapins. Now, wait a minute. Okay, nuts are considered a heart-healthy fat in general because you're dealing with all kinds of different fat. You're looking at polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, you're looking at omega-3s, omega-6s, and we have some of that information on the Ozark Chinquapin, but not all of it. But what we're seeing, at least according to the American Heart Association, the combinations of the fats that they possess is actually a pretty heart-healthy combination. Here's the only warning they give you about eating nuts like this. Don't eat a whole bunch because they have a lot of carbohydrates. That's the only warning that the American Heart Association gives about eating heart-healthy nuts. It's not the fat, it's the carbs. Because what happens to the carbs, we transfer it into fat. So, look at the next one, dietary fiber. This is the only time that the Ozark Chinquapin takes a second. It takes a second to the European chestnut, and digestive health is very important, and it can be helped by dietary fiber of this sort. So as you take a look at this, just comparing the chestnut family, the Ozark Chinquapin is a heavyweight. It's a heavy hitter. It's got a lot of value just within the group. Now, I am also an ecologist, and I'm a guy who likes to eat native wild foods. So I am interested in how does the Ozark Chinquapin stack up to other Native American nuts. So let's go back and look at that. Oh, before we get there, I do want to mention that if you look at some of these different family members, there's an incomplete data set out there. So when you see some of the gaps, like nobody seems to be rated for vitamin E, well, that's because no one would pay for it. All right, it's just not in the database. So there are gaps in the data. We chose not to get tests for certain vitamins because it would add cost for every vitamin, every mineral that you're trying to add to the list. So it's kind of like when you go to the grocery store and you want all this stuff and you only have $100, you have to start putting things back on the shelves. That's what we did with this nutritional analysis. But as you can see, that light blue line, we're very high in vitamin A, vitamin K, and these have a lot of importance for our eyes, for our vascular system, for neuron transmission, things like that. So these vitamins are important, and Ozark Chinquapins have it. Mineral content, the Ozark Chinquapin is rich in calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, and potassium. There are health benefits to having all of those trace minerals in the ground. Living in the Ozarks, they're essentially living in rocks. They're absorbing a lot of that from the immediate soil around them.